Okay, so here we are in our next section of medical terminology. We're going to start off with some suffixes that are specific to surgical procedures. We've seen some of these already. So for instance, ectomy, we use that in ovariohysterectomy, but we could simply say hysterectomy, meaning just removal of the uterus. So ectomy is to remove or excise. Excise means to cut and remove surgically. So you can see some others. There's stomy, there's gastrostomy, which is a different meaning, gastro meaning stomach, so that would be to make a hole in the stomach, similar to our urethrostomy, which was to make a new hole or opening in the urethra. So again, you're just going to have to memorize. Here's some more suffixes for diseases or conditions. Some of the really commonly used ones would be itis, that's inflammation, pathy, that means disease, emesis, vomiting, esis, iasis, asis, usually condition of the blood, as is emia. So all of these are common, but some of the more common ones. Here's some prefixes. A and an are often used, and they mean without or no. We see the Brady, Dolicho, meso's not on here, but we had those when we talked about the skull shapes. These are all blood, hema, hemo, or hemato. Let's see. Crypto, that means hidden. So if you have a male dog who has a testicle that is not descended, it's still up in the abdomen, we call them crypt orchid. Hidden orchid is testicle, crypt orchid. All right, so here's a picture showing you an example of these medical term conditions, and heme means like half. Plegia means paralysis. So you can see this dog here is being supported with a strap, and the rear half of his body is basically paralyzed. You can see his foot's flipped over and he's really not supporting his weight. So hemiplegia is the term we use to describe that. Here's some more disease or condition prefixes. Let's see what might be some of the more common ones. Hyper and hypo, those are very commonly used. Hyper means excessive or above. Hypo means below or less than. Megalo means really large, so you might have a really large organ like a spleen. Splenomegaly would mean enlarged spleen, something that you see, I ran out of room, something that you might see with certain types of cancer. Tachy means fast, so you can have tachycardia. That's rapid or faster than normal heart rate. That should be a D right there. Okay. Here's that splenomegaly. This is a spleen which is much larger than it should be, obviously no longer in the animal, and as I said, common with certain types of cancer and may need surgical removal. Here's an example of mega, which means large, and colon. So this is a radiograph of a cat, and all of this stuff right here is fecal matter in the large intestine. Some more that are really common and used for that example. Really so algia is pain. Cephalgia would be pain in the head or headache. Hematmesis is vomiting, and hemato, remember, means blood, so that would be to vomit blood. Hyperglycemia, emia is blood condition, so this is a blood condition involving high levels, hyper, of sugar, glyco, so high blood sugar. Esis, eosis, asis, osis all mean condition of, so nephrosis just means a condition of the kidney. Nephrolithiasis means a condition of kidney stones, with litho meaning stone. And genesis means origin, or there should be an N there, creation. So pathogenesis would be the origin or cause of a disease. Here's what you might see after an animal has experienced hematmesis, which is vomiting of blood. Some more examples. So oma is tumor, usually not a cancerous tumor, whereas sarcoma or adenoma often are cancerous. So an osteoma means a bone tumor that's not necessarily cancerous, just a growth on the bone. And osteosarcoma is a more cancerous, more dangerous type of bone tumor. So osteo meaning bone. There's pathy again, that's disease of. So we've got disease of the liver. Hepato is liver. And leukopenia means deficiency of white blood cells. Leuco meaning white. I believe I've got a picture of some of coprophagy, which is eating of, copro is feces. Phobia is fear of, so fear of water, hydrophobia. Here's a good one. We said a or an means without, so apnea. Apnea is air or breathing, so apnea means not breathing, so lack of respiration. Oops, not breathing. Rhea is flow, so rhinorrhea would just mean runny nose or flow from the nose. So coprophagy, an interesting little fact that you may or may not know is that many animals normally eat their own stool, own feces. Rabbits and guinea pigs, it's a normal thing. They actually need to consume their feces for some of the bacteria that are present for gut health. Dogs, however, do not need to eat their feces, but unfortunately they seem to like to eat their own or others' feces, especially cat feces. Dogs seem to be pretty drawn to those. So coprophagy is an unwanted behavior in our dogs and something that you will undoubtedly hear about and learn about some ways later on to how to stop that practice or behavior. As far as when we are making these terms that we're using plural versus singular, there are sometimes some rather crazy, at least maybe they might seem crazy compared to what you think of. To make a word plural, usually we just add an S, right? Well, in Latin and Greek, it's not the same. If you've had biology, you may have come across some of these plural forms. For instance, if the word ends in US, the plural form will end in I. So for instance, a term that you are familiar with, rhinoceros, if we had a whole bunch of rhinoceros, it wouldn't be rhinoceroses, it would be rhinoceri. So that's the plural form of that term ending in an I. And while I'm using that example, rhino means nose. Cerus, gosh, I'm not sure what it means. I think horn, but I'll have to look that one up. But horn nose is where the name for a rhinoceros comes from. And so, again, rhinoceri would be the plural form. If it ends in A, we add an E, and instead of pronouncing it, for instance, let me think of an example here. We have a membrane that surrounds the lungs, that's an E, called the pleura. If we were talking about many membranes that surround lungs, we would call them pleurae, and you would make it a long A in pronunciation. If it ends in A and X, like there's this bone called the phalanx, which is a finger bone. If we're talking about many finger bones, it would be phalanges. So we would change it to A-N-G-E-S, and so on. So again, you just try to become familiar with these plural forms and realize that it means the same thing, even though it ends in different letters. It's just the plural form. Okay, and here are some suffixes that refer to some instruments that might be used. We already had an example of graph or graphy. That's a printed out record, so like electrocardiography or electrocardiograph. Meter or metry, scope or scopy. Tome is an instrument, usually to cut. So all of these are mostly referring to some sort of instrument. Here's an example of something, a scope. Endo means within, so an endoscope, scope meaning an instrument to view, is an instrument that you can pass into a body and view the inside, say, of the stomach or the intestine, as you can see here. So that's just one of those terms in action.